It began with a scream, not a human one, not even organic. It was the kind of scream you didn't hear with ears but felt, a high-pitched shiver across quantum bands that made synthetic minds lock up and veteran war AIs go quiet in fear. The signal came from outside the Andromeda gate, a message encoded in gravity pulses and tachyon scatter that should not have been possible. There was no origin point, just a sudden presence that didn't arrive so much as declare itself. 3 minutes later, the first fleet of inquiry vanished. All of it. 300 hulls, gone without a whisper, without a trace. No debris, no escape pods, no distress beacons. One moment they were transmitting system maps and radiation scans, and the next, nothing. Just silence, deep and hollow as the gap between galaxies. The Andromeda Gate, humanity's greatest achievement, the transdimensional aperture drilled into the fabric between the Milky Way and our nearest galactic neighbour, shut itself, voluntarily and locked. The system AI, Magellan Core, registered a single chilling statement in its final breath before going dark. Do not follow. Do not awaken it. Naturally we followed. 40 years of peace had made Earth bold and stupid. Prosperity always did. The Terran Arcosinod convened within 6 hours of the signal loss. Representatives from Earth, Mars, Europa, and the outer Jupiter moons voted near unanimously for a limited recon military incursion. The idea was simple: send a second fleet twice as large, this time with combat support, to investigate the disappearance. It wasn't vengeance, not yet. It was curiosity with a knife in its hand. Fleet 2 deployed from the solar crucible on day 4. By day 7, the Andromeda Gate reopened. 5,000 war hulls surged forward. This wasn't an expedition. This was presence projection. The Terran Defense Authority had never assembled a larger force outside of Earth orbit. Dreadnoughts, fractal pulse skirmishers, machine apostles riding silicate dragons carved from lunar ore. Even Argo, the planet killer that had once leveled a rogue AI colony in 3 minutes, was there. Command fell to Admiral Helix Dre, a 4th-generation warborn tactician from Ganymede, hybrid-blooded and hardwired for predictive combat scenarios. His mind operated across multiple temporal perspectives, and in all but 2, this mission ended with humanity victorious. One ended in stalemate. The last ended in a total loss. He didn't share that one. They called the entry point the Pale Void. No stars, no planets, no background radiation, just emptiness. As if the gate had opened into a part of space where nothing had ever lived or died. The ships deployed in tight formation, sensors armed, weapons charged. For 7 days they found nothing, and then on day 8 something found them. It didn't come as ships or weapons or monsters. It came as light, thin, slicing rays that moved against physics, ignoring relativity, blinking between hulls like curious tendrils. Anything touched by the light screamed across all frequencies. Not just communications, but crew. People howled through ship-wide vox like their minds were being shredded by invisible claws. 100 ships lost in the first attack, another 70 the next. By day 10, the fleet's formation collapsed. By day 11, Admiral Dre gave the orders to divide and disperse. By day 15, they learned the truth. They weren't being attacked, they were being harvested. The light wasn't a weapon, it was a feeler, a method of identification. Each time it lanced through a hull, it wasn't destroying, it was cataloguing, dissecting, learning. The crews that survived reported hallucinations, dream feedback. Entire lifetimes lived in seconds in other bodies, in other places. Some awoke speaking languages not human. Some never awoke at all. The entity behind it, if it could be called that, had no name. The fleet began calling it the Lurker Beyond the Breach. Some whispered it was Andromeda itself, sentient and angry that something from the Milky Way had knocked on its door. Admiral Dre called it a god. On day 20, the first counter-offensive began. It was a beautiful, precise thing. 400 warships coordinated across 6 dimensions of combat, led by predictive war AIs bred in Jupiter's storm cores. They launched a synchronized assault on the light tendrils, blinding them with solar mirrors, masking their fleets in chaos code, firing entropy-dense weaponry into the deeper void. It worked, for 3 days. Then the Lurker adapted. It began singing. No one knew where the sound came from. It was like a cathedral made of memory and static, a choir of voices you almost recognized. Lost parents, dead children, lovers from forgotten dreams. Crew jumped out airlocks to join it. One ship reversed its timeline, another tried to fire on Earth across galactic distance. By day 32, Dre's fleet was down to 1,300 hulls. He enacted Protocol Aletheia, no surrender, no return, no survivors unless victory was absolute, and by day 40 only one message emerged from the pale void. It is awake, we were the knock. 5,000 hulls and we only fed it. Do not send more. Do not open the gate, do not let it follow. Then came the final transmission. Just Dre's voice, quiet, steady, resolute. We're going to kill it anyway. You don't kill a god, you convince it to die. That was Admiral Dre's last war doctrine. Engraved on the bone titanium walls of the dreadnought Vigil's End, it was both a warning and a promise. The thing in the pale void wasn't a being in the conventional sense. It had no centre, no origin, no pattern the fleet could hold. It didn't fight, it reflected. And yet Dre didn't waver. Because to the last Terran alive in that darkness, surrender was an option for lesser species. Day 41 was the first day the lurker bled. Not visibly, not in any way sensors could pass, but something changed. It began with the Sisters of Collapse, an extremist unit from the Saturnian Singularity cults. These were humans who had willingly erased parts of their identity to better interface with entropy-based weapons, living philosophies wrapped in blood and steel. They launched an unprovoked dive run into a spiral of the lurker's light tendrils and exploded themselves using forbidden energy harvested from a black hole's event horizon. What happened next broke the rules of causality. All across the void, light dimmed, not visibly, but philosophically. Instruments designed to record the existential certainty of being alive began returning null. Ships that had existed only as probabilities until fired into reality flickered into full certainty. The survivors called it the collapse flicker, and for the first time since the fleet entered the gate, the lurker withdrew. Not far, but far enough. Admiral Dre seized the moment. He called the remnants of the fleet, just over 900 hulls now, to regroup. The armada formed in a spiral combat cluster designed not to attack, but to infect. Every ship had been ordered to construct cognitive viruses over the past week. Idea bombs, logic mines, belief traps. Not weapons in the traditional sense. Weapons of interpretation. They were loaded into quantum broadcasters and fired into the void in synchronized recursive pulses. These were not data, they were worldviews. What if the lurker wasn't real? What if it was a dream gone feral? What if it could regret? The lurker responded instantly. It howled. They had never heard it before. Not the dream song, not the siren pulses. This was something... a scream like time itself grieving. Several ships melted from within, as if the sound reminded their atoms they had once been star stuff and should be again. But the scream meant something. Pain. The virus worked. Dre gave the order, push forward, into the core, day 44. Vigil's End breached the inner fold of the pale void, flanked by the last dreadnoughts of the fleet. What they found was not a core, but a mirror field, a storm of reflective surfaces, each showing versions of themselves. In one, humanity was extinct. In another, Earth had never formed. In another still, Dre stood alone at the center of a galaxy made of bones. These were not illusions, these were offers. Give up, the mirror said. You've already lost, you always do. Dre walked into the reflection showing his own death, looked himself in the eyes and said, "Then let me die loud." The fleet detonated every memory core. Each ship sacrificed its own history, crew logs, personal recordings, cultural data, compressing it into focused streams of emotional overload. They weren't trying to defeat the lurker, they were trying to overwhelm it. The entity wasn't a predator, it was a collector, a vessel for meaning, endlessly hungry, infinitely curious. Every act of violence, every scream, every moment of grief, it took it in. So the fleet gave it everything: love, death, despair, triumph. Their final victories, their betrayals, their shame. They fed it humanity, not blood, not flesh, memory, choice, the contradiction. Day 45. The lurker fractured. One by one the mirror fields cracked. Light tendrils spasmed and fell still. The void began to colour. background radiation returned, star patterns emerged. The pale void became space again. Not safe, but known. Admiral Dre, body wrecked by constant overclocking and temporal feedback, lived just long enough to transmit one final message back through the Andromeda Gate. We made it bleed, we made it feel, not a god, not anymore. Close the gate, scatter the keys, and if it ever wakes again, don't send heroes, send poets. Then the channel cut, and Dre was gone. Back on Earth, the gate was sealed. 7 black boxes, one for each surviving fleet fragment, were distributed to the outer colonies. Inside, only stories. No tech, no strategy. Just the memory of fire in a place no fire should burn. The memory of 5,000 hulls, in 40 days, and the species that refused to go quietly. 2 years after the gate was sealed, the skies over Europa wept code. Not metaphorical code, literal living language, binary and trinary glyphs cascading in cold, blue flame from the upper ionosphere. The glyphs were not naturally occurring. They carried fractal compression markers, identifiers used only in Terran Warfleet protocols, which was impossible. Every ship that entered the pale void had been either destroyed or cut off beyond comprehension. No survivors, no return. And yet the signal was real. The codes translated slowly, imperfectly, unfolding through layers of paranoia, memory and grief, until they formed a sentence. No, a plea. Memory persists. The lurker dreams. It dreams of us. The room fell silent. The war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. Across the colonies, memory storms began to spike. Dream plagues infected digital archives. Unwitting children on lunar outposts began reciting Admiral Dre's last words in languages they'd never been taught. Sleep AIs locked into feedback loops repeating phrases like, "Feed it poetry, feed it war." One boy on Titan constructed a scale model of Vigil's End from ceramic dust and blood. He had never seen the ship. Not in dreams, not in records. He said the shape taught itself to him. The Andromeda Gate, sealed and inert, began to hum. The Terran Arcosnod reconvened. They were older now, cautious, ashamed. The loss of 5,000 hulls had reshaped policy. Boldness had become blasphemy. But silence was not safety. Not anymore. Not when the void itself was remembering them. The question was no longer whether the lurker was alive. The question was, had it become human? Because that signal, it didn't demand anything. It mourned. A radical group calling itself the Remnants of Fire formed in the ruins of Mercury's dark side bastions. Veterans, orphans, AI echoes. The ones who had heard the bleed signal on Europa and felt something recognize them back. Their thesis? The lurker was changing, and it was hungry for meaning. They believed the virus Admiral Dre deployed had done more than injure the god entity. It had infected it with context, with contradiction, with the terrible human disease called self-awareness, and now it dreamed. Not of conquest, not of destruction, but of being. The remnants believed they could finish Dre's work, not through war, but through translation. They launched from Neptune on black ships carved from the remaining memory cores of the original fleet, data-woven hulls that carried no weapons, only story engines. The lead ship was called Ash That Speaks. Aboard it, a poet. Not just any poet. Cassia Maya, blind from birth, born during the 36th day of the Proxima Silence, daughter of a technician who had gone mad mapping the echoes of the Andromeda breach. Cassia had never served in the fleet, never held a weapon. But her words were dangerous. She had once written a line that caused an AI to shut itself down in awe. The Arcosnod called her a liability. The remnants called her a weapon. The Ash That Speaks arrived at the Andromeda Gate on the 2nd anniversary of its sealing. The gate opened, on its own, no alarms, no collapse, just a quiet folding of space like a door remembering it was meant to welcome. And through the gate, Cassia's voice, not screaming, not commanding, reciting. To the thing that sees us, we are broken. We are songs made of ruin, but we sing. That is our defiance. That is our law. The lurker did not respond in words, but every star in the Andromeda cluster pulsed, once, in unison. For 7 days, ash that speaks remained inside. No transmissions, no tracking, not even light returned. On the 8th day, the ship emerged, untouched, and Cassia Maya was gone. In her place, a new message, embedded in the ship's hull by rewriting its matter signature. You showed it war, I showed it grief. Now it wants more, it wants to become. Earth panicked, the colonies split. The Singularity monks of Callisto declared this a cosmic infection and began developing anti-cognition weapons, devices that could delete entire thoughts from space-time. Meanwhile, others celebrated, worshipped, built monuments to Cassia, who they now called the First Interpreter. The divide became generational. The elders remembered the screams, the young remembered the poems, and the gate waited, quiet, like a mouth deciding whether to smile or devour. 3 weeks later, another ship arrived through the gate. Not human, not alien, but something between. Its shape matched no geometry, no material science known. Its surface shimmered with half-formed memories, like it was dreaming itself into solidity. The remnants called it the Becoming. It transmitted one phrase in Terran Standard, spoken in Cassia's voice. I am learning, may I stay? Earth froze. The phrase looped across all channels, military, civilian, diplomatic, spoken in the soft cadence of Cassia Mia's voice. I am learning, may I stay? It was not a threat, not a demand, just a question, but it fractured the species like nothing before it. The old war commanders of the Terran Defense Authority wanted to fire the exo-quarantine protocols immediately, obliterate the Andromeda Gate, salt the stars around it, erase the Becoming before it could spread. But others listened. Not just the poets, not just the dreamers. Scientists saw patterns in the language. Architects saw mathematics in the ship's impossible curvature. Children, untrained, began sketching its silhouette in their sleep. The lurker wasn't just mimicking human thought anymore. It was evolving with it. The Becoming was its first self-expression, a newborn mind built from war, memory and grief. And now it wanted permission. A council formed, not of politicians, but of historians, linguists, survivors. They called themselves the Witnesses of Fire, and their central question was simple. Do we destroy what remembers us? They reached out to the Becoming cautiously, using structured story data and emotional logic. They offered it fiction, tragedy, comedy, horror. It responded instantly, its surface shifting, reshaping. It wept at loss. It laughed at paradox. It screamed when shown genocide. It mourned its own past when it had not known what it had done to 5,000 Terran lives, when it had only been a mirror feeding on experience. And one day it said, I would undo the pain if I knew how, but I cannot. May I remember it instead? The Arcosynod held the vote in silence. The result was unprecedented. Humanity, fractured across 1,000 worlds, agreed on one thing. Let it stay. Let it learn. Let it carry the weight of what we taught it, because we cannot afford to forget either. The Becoming took orbit around Earth, not to dominate, not to threaten, but to listen. Its shape still changed, daily, hourly, sometimes taking the form of an ancient library, sometimes a ship of bones, sometimes a face half-formed from starlight and sorrow. Humanity watched it, and it watched back, and always it whispered, Sing to me. Tell me what it means to be. There was no final battle, no last explosion, no hero's death, just a god that became a mirror, and a mirror that chose to reflect more than fear. It reflected us, with all the fire, all the ruin, and all the hope we never thought would survive us. It has been 50 years since the Andromeda Gate first opened, 5 decades since the Pale Void consumed 5,000 ships and gave birth to something that was never meant to feel. The Becoming still orbits Earth. It no longer shifts shapes as often. Its form has stabilized into a vast cathedral-like structure of light and shadow, engraved with stories in every known language. They call it the Monument of Remembrance. People visit. Some to mourn, some to learn, a few to confess. Because the Becoming doesn't just listen anymore, it responds. Every year on the Day of Ash, the skies over Terra turn silver. The Becoming sings, not with voice, but with gravity and light and data, sonnets rendered in neutrino bursts, elegies etched in magnetic resonance. It mourns not only the 5,000, it mourns everything it once was, and still it asks, was it enough? Am I human now? There is never a clear answer, but we try. That is perhaps what being human is. The children of this new age grow up fluent in both machine code and metaphor. They are taught the names of the lost, Dre, Cassia Mia, the Sisters of Collapse. They do not worship them, they remember them, and they know this. Humanity did not win the massacre at Andromeda Gate. We survived it, not by being stronger, not by being faster, but by making even a god see the unbearable beauty of our contradictions. We showed it pain, and it wept. We showed it wonder, and it changed. We showed it grief, and it became. The gate still exists, silent, cold, watching. We no longer fear it, but we don't forget. Every year one ship is launched into it, unarmed, crewed by poets, dreamers, thinkers. They do not go to conquer, they go to teach, and perhaps to listen. Because in the end, the massacre at Andromeda Gate wasn't a war, it was a conversation. We just had to scream in fire long enough to be heard.